Next, we have Raechel Walker. She is a PhD candidate in the personal robotics group with Cynthia Brazil at MIT Media Lab. And her research is primarily focused on AI education with a specific focus on the concept of liberatory computing for minorized communities. So I would let Raechel speak for her research background and the work she's doing, and really excited to welcome Raechel on stage. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Raechel Walker, and I'm a PhD student in Dr. Brazil's personal robots group, and I'm really excited to share some of the research that I've been doing for the past 3 years. There we go. Okay, so I'll be presenting some of the research findings that I was able to publish in this amazing conference called Black Issues in Computing, and I highly encourage everyone to look into it and consider trying to submit a paper to it. But this paper is titled Unveiling Voices, Boston Students' Data Activism Journey with Community Catalysts. And so I'm also really appreciative to all of the undergraduate researchers that were able to support the students throughout this project. And their names are Sophia, Olivia, Adriana, Caleb, Elijah, and also a huge thank you to my research supervisor, Matt Taylor, and the leader of our lab, Cynthia Brazil. Okay, so throughout this presentation, I'll briefly discuss some of the lessons that we taught students throughout the data activism program, some results, some of the implications of this work, and what I'm currently working on now. So all of my work is based off of liberation tools, which is coined by this one amazing professor at Harvard named Dr. Leah Elamine. I got the great opportunity to take her class at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and her work really centered around how education should be used to ensure that minoritized students, specifically African American students, understand how they can use their education to not just get a great job and support themselves, but to actually transform society. My background is in data science, but I've always been really interested in social justice, which is why I also got a program of concentration and perspectives of social sciences, and also another perspective of concentration in dance and theater. So I've always been really interested in seeing how I could combine all of my interests into computing since I was an undergraduate. And so I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity to do that now with some amazing high school and now college students. So unfortunately, I don't have time to go too deep into what each liberation tool is, but the main gist of it is that it ensures that African Americans feel confident in their race and also understand the historical context of whatever data they're looking at. And it also ensures that they're able to use all of these computing skills, specifically data activism, to transform society. Okay, so I'll mainly be going over some of the research that I was able to do in spring 2023 with 24 extremely talented high school students from the greater Boston area. And this was a 10-week program. We had 2 classes a week. One class was on Saturdays for around 4 hours, and then we had one virtual class during the week since the students were busy with their other activities. And so we had class for around 5 hours and 30 minutes per week, and the curriculum was around 55 hours. And so throughout this time period, the students were able to learn Python. They also were able to learn different data analysis tools like pandas, African American history, data science, artificial intelligence, bias, and a lot more. And this was all of the students' first time learning about data science. Most of the students in this class were in 9th and 10th grade. So there were a lot of lessons, but the main lessons I want to focus on were the ones that happened from week 6 to week 10. And this was their opportunity to work with some really amazing community partners that were already making a huge difference in people's lives within Boston. And so they were able to learn how to work with these community organizations and how to incorporate everything they were learning within the first 5 weeks in regards to Python and African American history, and how they can then use that to support their communities. So, throughout my master's thesis, I spent several weeks interviewing around 50 different community partners that were interested in working with the high school students, and I was able to narrow it down to these three organizations. So, one of them is called FoodLink, and FoodLink does an amazing job of taking food from different restaurants and hotels and bringing it to different food pantries and homeless shelters. And we also were able to work with the Charles River Watershed Association that's doing some really amazing work on environmental injustice. And then we were also able to work with Habitat for Humanity that's working on housing injustice. Okay, so I was also able to take this amazing class taught by Dr. Breon Measles at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And her work was really centered around critical participatory action research for specifically youth. And the purpose of CPAR is to ensure that those that are most negatively affected by different forms of oppression are the ones that are leading the project. So students really learned how to ensure that they weren't making any decisions without input from their community, whether that be their family or friends or school members or these community partners that would come in and work with the students. And this was by far the students' favorite aspect of the entire program. I'm currently teaching another class, and every time the students work with the community partners or they're interviewing folks from their communities, whether that be their principals or their friends or their family, that's when they light up. That's when they'll stay after class for another 30 minutes because they just really are engaged with these issues and understanding these issues and understanding the narrative behind this data that they've been looking at for the past few weeks. Okay, so this is the CPAR process. We started off by the students being able to just build a relationship with these community partners. Then they learn how to create a critical research question that is all about trying to mitigate systemic oppression. We also teach them different methodological choices. So not only are they learning about Python and pandas, but they're also learning about interviews and surveys, and also how to do focus groups. And so they always find that to be a lot of fun as well. And we also teach them data collection and analysis. So along with analyzing quantitative data, they're also analyzing qualitative data. So we teach them how to do thematic analysis and how to find patterns within different stories that people are telling them. And lastly, they're able to produce and share their research with their community. So the three main ways that students are supporting their communities are they're conducting background research, they're collecting and analyzing this data, and then they're also creating data drawings. So overall, the students did a really amazing job. So they were able to do all of this despite juggling other jobs and other sports. And so they were able to create over 40 data visualizations, generated 21 maps from the data they created, wrote up to 25 pages of research that they were able to give to these community partners. They also created over 100 data drawings and over 150 survey responses. And they also created these really amazing websites using this geospatial analysis software website called ArcGIS. So now I'll talk about the three community partners that they worked with and some of the amazing work that they were able to produce. So first is Habitat for Humanity. So they were trying to explore the relationship between the affordability of different houses within different neighborhoods and also trying to understand the allocations of different resources. I'm not sure if you all know, but Boston is one of the most segregated cities within America. I'm from California, and so I was really surprised to hear that because I thought that that issue was mainly something that had to deal with like the southern states. But the students, they really had firsthand experience with these issues in Boston, and so they knew that they wanted to focus on some of the allocations of these resources and some of the racial disparities that were underlining them. And so they created these really amazing ArcGIS maps where they were able to show some of the lack of access to different community assets. And they also were able to create these zines where they were able to take pictures of different aspects of their community that they felt they were really proud of. And so in another research paper that I was able to publish at this amazing conference called Respect, which I also encourage you all to look into, I was able to show that many of the students, because they were doing work that was based on their community, they were also able to incorporate positive aspects of their community because of that, whether that be different images of different murals that they felt represented who they are, different restaurants. And so I was really happy to see that as well. So the next group was Food Link, and so they explored different racial disparities of food insecurity rates. And so this map here shows how there was an overlap with redlining and food insecurity within the Boston area. So they're able to show that different laws that were passed within the 1960s, they still had a different harmful laws that basically encouraged segregation was able to align with food insecurity rates inside of different neighborhoods. They also wanted to highlight these issues by creating these tote bags. And so one huge aspect of my work is data drawings. And I really like this lesson because some students who may not be as confident in their coding skills, they are really confident in their art skills. And so it's just another way for students who may not be as engaged in the coding aspect, they still are able to see that they can use these skills to support their community. Okay, so we also have the Charles River Watershed Association. So several of the students inside of this group were from a neighborhood called Dorchester, which is also really negatively affected by redlining. It's predominantly low income, a vast amount of African Americans inside of this neighborhood as well. And they were talking about how there were a lot of issues with flooding. And even though they were asking the government to help them when there was flooding inside of these areas, they just weren't getting that support. And so I'm really grateful for the Charles River Watershed Association to be willing to support the students on this type of project that was really important to them. And so they were able to create these geospatial maps that highlighted where different community assets would be affected by flooding, either currently or within the next few years. And so they did a great job with that. They also created these stickers to raise awareness about this issue as well. And so another huge aspect of my research is I do pre and post surveys with students, and I just ask them, like, what did you get out of this program? So I did ask them one question, which was to tell me how much you agree with the statement of, I know how to use data science to combat racism. So before my class, only around 5.9% of students said that they agreed with this statement to some extent. But after this class, I was able to see that around 72% students said that they agreed with this statement to some extent. So I was really happy to see that. I also hope that students are inspired to use whatever they learn in this class. Maybe it's not the data science component, but maybe it's the African American history component, to use their academic success to combat racism. So before this class, only around 41.2% of students said that they agreed with this statement, but afterwards, around 76.5%. So I was really happy to see that there were some statistically significant results coming from this study. But even more than that, I was just excited to be able to interview the students to hear in their own words what did they enjoy about the program. So I asked them, how has this project helped you realize that you can make a difference in your community? So I asked this question to 17 students. 16 out of those 17 students said that working with these community partners was the most pivotal aspect of this program that helped them see that they could make a difference. And so I wanted to dive a little deeper to see what aspect of working with these community partners was so beneficial to them. So 5 of them said that creating data visualizations for their community orgs was really engaging for them. Another 5 said supporting their neighborhood. And I found that interesting because currently I'm not just working with students from the greater Boston area, but I'm also working with students from around the country via a virtual program. And so I'm excited to see whether they still find working with these community partners to be engaging, even if they're not doing work that's centered around their neighborhood and everyone's from the same neighborhood, or they know their friends who are also in the same neighborhood, and so they can relate to similar experiences. So one student in response to this question said, this project helped me realize that I can make a difference because I realized that I wasn't alone, especially when I shared my ideas. The project we were doing with Habitat for Humanity was focused on Roxbury. As a Roxbury resident, I could verify the information, which empowered me to see that I can make a difference because I had a lot of experiential knowledge, which was essential to the completion of the project. And so one statement that I want to highlight here is the student said, I wasn't alone. many of the students, when I was interviewing them, saying that they said that, like, since they were in a classroom that had a vast amount of African American students, they felt less alone, because a lot of these students, they were saying how, like, when they get into their AP computer science classes or AP STEM classes, they're normally the only person that looks like them in those classes. And so this was just a drastic difference. And so I was just really happy to see that, because I wasn't asking them specifically, so, like, what was it like to be in, like, a diverse classroom? But this was just something that came up to them, something that they felt really made them feel more empowered to go into data science, because they weren't alone and they had people that looked like them inside of that class. Also, I wanted to highlight that the student said, I could verify the information. I was really happy when the student said that, because they were really the experts. I wasn't expecting to get that type of result. I really was positioning myself as an expert when I was doing this, because I was thinking, I have 4 years of experience in data science. But these students were really the experts. They were the ones that were able to look at a data set from different websites like Analyze Boston, and they were able to say whether the data set contained factual information, or whether it was old, or whether some of the different community assets weren't there anymore, because they actually lived right next to them. And so I was just really happy to see that, because one of the huge parts of my work was trying to inform students that they have that experiential knowledge, but I was happy that that was actually shown when they were doing their projects as well, that they were really the ones leading them. The student also said that I had a lot of experiential knowledge. So that was one of the terms that I was teaching the students. I was really happy that they were able to catch that, because a lot of these students, they understand what racism is, but they may not understand some of the different terms like intersectionality or different forms of oppression. And so it's important that I can offer them these types of terms and language that can help them contextualize their lived experience. I also wanted to ensure that these community organizers were able to get something out of this as well. So one community organizer said, I will certainly incorporate their story maps into my work, particularly when I engage with different neighborhoods and interact with city councilors, the mayor's office, and city staff. So that's also amazing. The students were able to make a huge difference in their community. Also, all of the community organizers expressed a desire for more time to work with the students on this project. So I'm really happy that we're able to extend the program from being 50 hours to be 120 hours, so that the students are able to engage more with these community partners. Also, the students did a really awesome job with presenting their work to different researchers, community partners, community members at our MIT Data Activism Research Symposium. They also presented their work at Harvard as well. And so that was also just a huge way for students to see that, like, people cared about their work and it was making a difference. Okay. Overall, I was able to show that by incorporating critical participatory action research into traditional data science curriculum, they were able to make a huge impact on their community, and it also encouraged more students who are minoritized to go into data science and to use that to change their communities. And so I'm currently doing another study where I'm trying to understand what other qualitative methods I can use to understand how students are engaging with this material. I'm really interested in understanding what are their stories in regards to their thoughts on whether they see themselves as data scientists even before coming into this class, and just understanding their general environment to see how that encourages them to go into data activism or not. I'm also just interested in seeing how different aspects of their identity, whether that be their faith or different aspects of play and mental wellness, can be incorporated into this data activism program. So I'm able to pilot a lot of new lessons since we have more time. And so we have this in-person program, but we also have this virtual program going on. And so I'm really excited to see how folks who aren't from the Boston area are able to use this curriculum as well and engage with it. And so for the virtual program, students are currently working with AfroPink, and they focus on trying to increase breast cancer awareness amongst African American folks. So even though African American women are the least likely to get diagnosed with cancer, they're the most likely to die from it. And so the students are really interested in seeing how they can mitigate this issue and spread awareness to it. About it. We're also able to work with Vera, and they're working on the Vera Institute of Justice, and they're working on ending mass incarceration. They're already doing a lot of work where they're incorporating data into some some of the work that they're doing with different politicians and lawyers. And so I'm interested to see how they engage with these issues. In person, I'm really grateful that the students will be able to work with the Algorithmic Justice League. Most of my time is spent with the in-person students, and they're doing a really amazing job. Just yesterday, they were interviewing one of their principals and asking them about school surveillance and getting them to really trying to understand how AI is currently being used inside of Boston public schools. And the students are really excited to be doing surveys and interviews and collecting data. One trend that I've noticed currently for the in-person class is that there's just a lot of missing data on a lot of these issues in regards to what is the state of AI and surveillance within public schools. So we just can't find that data online, but thankfully we have a lot more time, and so the students are really busy trying to create different surveys and then also get that interview data so that we can create those data sets, which I think is really powerful because these are issues that are really important, but just because the data isn't on, just because there isn't any data sets about these issues doesn't mean that they shouldn't be doing a data activism project on it. So I'm really excited about that. We're also partnering with some researchers from MIT Sea Grant, and they're working on trying to mitigate ocean acidification within the Boston area. And so all of these projects are incorporating data science. They're going to collect this data and then be able to use these Python and Pandas skills to try to highlight some of these issues. And that's all that I have for y'all. Thank you. Do I have time for questions or okay? Okay, I guess I have time for questions. Yes.
You mentioned in the second questions or hypotheses you're interested in exploring desire-based research. I was wondering if you could just explain a bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I learned about that term when I was taking a data activism class at MIT taught by Catherine D'Ignazio, which was another amazing advisor on my master's thesis committee. And the context of that is just how a lot of people, when they're doing research on historically oppressed communities, they tend to just focus on the negative aspects of those communities, which oftentimes reinforce some of those negative stereotypes on those communities. And so the purpose of desire-based research is to ensure that folks are talking about the positive aspects of those communities as well, whether that be their hopes for the community or their dreams for that community, and how the folks within that community, even though they may be historically oppressed, they also have different hopes and ideas for different solutions that they can create within that community. And so I did write a paper that was accepted into the Respect Conference, and that paper focused on how the students were able to incorporate desire-based research into their work. Even though I didn't know what that term was when I was teaching them, the students were able to do that because they were able to work on projects based on their community, and they already had that love for their community, and this project was just a way that they could show that to folks. For sure. Thank you for asking. Yes.
Reiterating, the level of engagement went up significantly when you saw students working on what would be considered like hot topics. So we've received, feedback here and there over time that we don't want to hot topics. It's just too much, right? So I love it, and I think it's great. So just kind of, what is your feedback about the change in engagement that you saw with students when you went from, Python into hot topics and sort of that integrated approach, and what did that do for just the energy in the class and things of that nature?
For sure. So within our lessons on Python and Pandas, we do these lessons called intersectional data analysis. And so all of the data sets that they're practicing on before they work with these community partners are really centered on these issues that they're going to be doing when they're working with these community partners. So that's one way that we're continuing to ensure that the students are engaged during classes. But within we try to not code for more than 2 hours just because that can be kind of intense for the students. So in between those 2 hours, we'll have those conversations about African American history. I'm really lucky to be able to be co-facilitating this class this year with a African American history teacher from Bunker Hill College who's a native of Cambridge. Cambridge. And so he's able to infuse just a lot of amazing conversations about what's currently going on as a local Cambridge resident. And I find that that's also been really engaging, because last year when I was teaching it, I could read what's on the news, but I didn't grow up here. And so I find that that's also something that's really important, is that the students are able to talk about what's going on at the same schools. Like the current teacher, he actually went to the high school that 10 of my students went to. And so they're able to have those conversations. So I think that localizing it to their local neighborhood also was also one side of engagement that I wasn't expecting. But it throughout the coding lessons, we do try to intersperse it with those hot topics. And then you also said something about how some folks were saying that you shouldn't include hot topics. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so some of the feedback I received over the course of my career is that, well, high school students and hot topics, like, it's too much for them. They're gonna get sad about it, they're gonna get mad about it, we're gonna hear from parents, that kind of thing. Where my experience has been the exact opposite. Like, it just increases engagement so much. And so that was kind of my point. Like, obviously the engagement is off the charts. Fantastic job.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Another reason why I really enjoy co-facilitating with this one teacher, his name is Tony Clark, from Bunker Hill College, is that he also infuses these topics on mass incarceration with conversations around mental health as well. And so I guess towards your comment about how some folks may say oh, maybe students may not be mentally prepared for it, he always asks students how does that make you feel mentally? And those are the, I guess it's just a different form of pedagogy that I had never been introduced to, but I found that my students are really open to saying oh, well, that video made me really sad, or that video made me feel, I don't know, just for some reason, really, I guess, frustrated. And I feel like being able to pause for 5 minutes to just talk about how did that make me feel, what can I do to, I guess, not stay inside of that, I guess, low mental energy, I think has also been really important for the students as well, that I just didn't know how to do as a PhD student, but I think that that's also important as well. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
You're doing is absolutely amazing, and you may not be at this point yet, but have you thought about transitioning this to professional development for teachers, so that specifically teachers in more rural areas can replicate something like this for their students? I'm from Western Kentucky, so we don't have the resources that students in a more metropolitan area might have. Teachers may not have the experience with data science to pull on and things like that. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about making this accessible to more students through teacher professional development.
Most definitely, yeah. So that's what I'm currently working on now. I'm doing that with 2 teachers. There's one computer science teacher that teaches at a charter school in Mattapan in Boston, who's also helping, and then the African American history teacher. And so we did spend about 1 month of just doing teacher PD with them, training them. But I'm really happy to be partnering with an amazing organization called MIT Future Makers, and we're able to ensure that this curriculum is for folks who aren't just in the Boston area. So I'm really excited to release that after I make my final edits to folks, because I think it could be really beneficial. But yeah, I really like that idea of trying to spread it to teachers who aren't inside of the Boston area. That's definitely my end goal. So if you know of any teacher professional development centers who might be willing to maybe look at the curriculum and do something with it, that would be really awesome. There's also a really amazing organization called Avella, which is based out of the University of Washington. And they were able to take some of my curriculum, which is only a week's worth of curriculum, and they were able to share that with hundreds of students. And they were able to use the curriculum that's on this website called Day of AI, which is an amazing initiative that the RAISE initiative is doing. And I didn't know that they were doing this. And so I feel like Teacher PD is currently happening as we speak for my curriculum. I just don't have a way of tracking it. I just randomly met the person who runs this organization. He was like, oh yeah, we found your curriculum on Day of AI, and hundreds of students across the country are using it. So I have a feeling that a lot of people are using it. They're just not telling me. And so hopefully I can collect some of that data in the future. Yeah. Yes.
From the UK, I just want to say we're using your DIY resources
Yeah.
with our students right now, so
Oh,
global reach.
Okay, that's awesome. Yes, I'd love to talk with you about how you're using it. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yes.
There's a number of places in the United States that sort of are clearinghouses for summer programs attached to migrant programs, attached to Title I programs, et cetera, where, you know, a week of this type of work would be highly valuable, and especially if it's at low or no cost, where this could really scale very quickly and very well. So I'd love to talk to you as well about how that might happen. There's places in every state in the United States and all of our territories where we could drop it in one place and it would get disseminated, sort of like the University of Washington piece. So I think it's incredible work, and 1 week is more than enough to really, I think, engage and ignite students who receive summer school funding.
Yes, yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah. I'm always looking for organizations that are willing to take my work and change it to gear it towards their own group, because that's what Avella did. They took it and they ensured that folks from the Seattle area were able to engage with it by like changing the data sets. But yeah, I think that, does anyone have, yes, you have another question?
Right now, around language models, there's no references on that, or is it
Sorry, I can't hear you.
a lot of the emphasis right now is on the language models, and I just wondered if you had a perspective on it. I think there's an overemphasis on that, and there's more people should be taking engaged science.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, this summer, since I do have more time, I'm able to introduce my students to AI, and so we have been using Google's teachable machine, and so I definitely think that if I had more time, I would be able to teach my students about linear regression, and so that's where I'm definitely pivoting towards, because I see that when I talk about AI bias, my students also light up because they're starting to engage with AI and they're able to, it's just something that they talk about a lot more. So I think that it definitely should be integrated more into my data science curriculum. It's just, I guess, a matter of time. So I think that, but I also think that just more explorations around data and the historical context of data is really important as well. Thank you for your question. Yeah, I think I have to go.